Hello and welcome to Sideline Story, your destination for sports news, analysis, and discussions. I'm Yang Guang. This week we move to basketball and analyze Team China's prospects at the Asia Cup. Will key players' absence impact the team's run? How is Asia Cup different from other tournaments? For this chat, I'm joined here with my fantastic co-hosts Tian Yu and Brandon Yates. Alright, the 2025 Asia Cup is underway in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Team China is grouped with host Saudi Arabia and India and Jordan. China is the most successful team in Asia Cup history, winning the title 16 times, but this time, however, China has to play the Asia Cup without its usual star power with the likes of Zhang Jinlin, Zhou Qi, Cui Yongxi, and guard Zhao Jiwei, all sidelined mostly due to injury problems. So Tianyu, given this roster limitation, what's a realistic benchmark for Team China at Asia Cup? What's your expectation for Team China's standings in the end?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that without key guys like you just mentioned, Zhou Qi, Zheng Fanbo, and of course Yang Hansen, this Chinese squad is not currently at its full strength. Zhou Qi, for all his ups and downs due to his injuries, but he's still a very big presence, I would say. Yeah, he's a guy who knows how to score inside, and he can be a very important anchor across the defense line. And Zheng Fanbo, I mean, he just signed with the Brooklyn Nets. Even though it's just an Exhibit 10 contract, it still says a lot about his strength and his ability. And also Yang Hansen, man, he's probably one of the most brilliant young star in this Chinese squad right now. So not having them really hurts. But even with all these setbacks, I think there's still a silver lining here, because this actually opens the door for younger players to shine. I mean, guys like Liao Sanning, Wang Junjie, and Zhao Jiayi, they've been showing some really good flashes in the CBA. And now we get to see what they can do with bigger stages, with bigger roles on the national team. And also, it's part of the natural transition process. The team's clearly trying to build the next core to test who can really step up in crucial times. So also, let's not forget, heading to the Asian Cup, we had 4 warm-up games, and China just went 4-0 in these games. So sure, the opponents weren't exactly top tier, but those games can be a real confidence booster. This has shown that this team has got a good rhythm and some really confidence, especially on defense. Under coach Guo Shiqiang, I think the defense of the team has looked so far so good. It is more aggressive and it's more energized, so that's a promising sign. I think China's goal has to be securing a spot in the top 8, and from there trying to make a real push. A top 4 finish or even a bronze medal is still possible, but just not guaranteed. At the end of the day, though, I think this tournament is less about chasing titles or chasing medals. It is more about checking out the future. I mean, just as I mentioned, seeing which young guys can step up, who can handle the pressure, and maybe even identifying the next leader of this team.
Right. Brandon, given the players China has now at its disposal, do you consider China as one of the title favorites still?
I wouldn't say they're one of the title favorites. I think that on paper and going into the tournament, there's definitely been a lot of caution kind of directed towards the Chinese team. Of course, we've already mentioned they're the most successful team in the competition's history with 16 titles, and there's a lot of prestige around this team, and a lot of expectation, which I think generally Chinese teams do deal with pretty well, particularly this basketball team at the Asia Cup, because of just all of the the success that they've had in the past. But I think going into this tournament, of course, missing some really significant names never really helps in terms of pundits' expectations going into a tournament. So when you're missing 1 or 2 big names, particularly names that are in and around the NBA or, playing at the highest level on the international stage, that's never a great way to start. But I definitely think that the CBA gets more and more competitive and stronger every year. And there definitely does seem to be an emerging pool of young talents coming through a lot of the teams in the CBA. And I think that's really exciting. And some of those names are already making their way into the Chinese team and will feature at this Asia Cup. So I think that's very exciting. So I think even though there is a lot of experience missing, I think it is going to be down to the players that are already in the squad and some of the emerging talent that doesn't have that much experience or, hype around their name yet. I think that if those players are given opportunities, so I think in conjunction with those players as well as the braveness of the coaching staff to actually field some of the young talent that is in form right now. I think that's going to kind of be make or break for this Chinese team. And look, they're off to a good start. I know it was a tight win against the hosts, Saudi Arabia. I believe it was 93-88. So, I mean, a tight win, but a win nonetheless. So I think that will give, a lot of the current players that have stepped in to fill the void of the big stars as well as some of the younger talents that got a couple of minutes. I think that will definitely give them a lot of confidence. And I think that's also going to be big as, the amount of confidence that they're carrying into this tournament. Then again, that might also, not on paper, but like mentally, it might be something that slightly benefits China because I often find that when a team has a lot of pressure and expectations, sometimes that can lead to less than great performances actually on the court. So when there's not that much expectation on your shoulders, it kind of allows you to go out there and play without too many expectations or without much fear. Maybe a quarterfinal, semifinal, or even a final run is possible from there.
Well, from my perspective, I just think China actually sent its B team or the reserve team to the Asia Cup.
Yeah.
As we mentioned, a lot of key players were unable to play, and the biggest toll came from the forwards. I mean, the likes of Zheng Fanbo, Cui Yongxi, and Zhang Junlin. Their absence really weakened China's size and coverage on both ends of the court.
Yeah.
So realistically speaking, China is not the strongest team of this tournament. And the Chinese Basketball Association also lowered their target for this Asia Cup, which is securing last 8 and striving for last 4. I agree with Brandon. This might be beneficial for the mentality of the Chinese squad, which is using a lot of young players. They don't need to go to the tournament thinking about the burdens on their shoulders and the huge pressure. This might unlock their potential at such a big tournament and bring about unexpectedly good results in the end. But at the end of the day, if we take a look at the landscape of Chinese basketball right now, even though China can assemble a fully healthy squad with all the key players gathered for this tournament, I still don't think China can guarantee a podium finish at Asia Cup. But years back, when Yao Ming, Yi Jianlian, Wang Zhizhi were still playing, they could easily dominate such events. Tianyu, do you think Team China is facing a talent drought in basketball? Because if we take a look at the opener, Team China was against Saudi Arabia. They won by just 5 points. But 20 years ago at Asian Championships, China easily crushed Saudi Arabia 98-10. So what do you think?
That was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just in terms of the number of big names or talents, we definitely are less stacked like we used to be, because like you said, in the early 2000s we've got a bunch of big names like Yao Ming, Yi Jianlian, Wang Zhizhi, and also a bunch of other great players like Sun Yue. So the squad was pretty solid, and with these excellent players. So just by comparison, I think we might be lacking some sparkles in the current squad. But just in terms of whether we should naturalize more players, I think we, instead of just saying we're hitting a wall, I would say we're in a transition period, and what we need most right now is balance. Naturalizing players can absolutely give a team a very instant boost. There's no question about that, because they bring in skill, experience, and they can fill in some big gaps in our lineup, especially in positions we're weak at. But relying too heavily on them, that can be problematic. Just take an example of the Philippines. They have made some great efforts in naturalizing players. And they won some big games with this strategy. But now their youth system is struggling. The naturalized player in the squad, Justin Brownlee, he was scoring almost half the points the team can get in a game. And the local young players, they barely touch the ball. And their under-19 team recently finished at a historic low. So it's kind of a short-term a win, but long-term loss situation you really want to avoid. But another example, Japan, on the other hand, is doing it right. They actually naturalized a few key players like Joshua Hawkinson, but they didn't let them overshadow the local core. Guys like Rui Hachiruma and Yuki Kawamura, they still get the spotlight of the team. And the naturalized player, they just fit in where the squad need them the most, like helping on the boards or setting picks. And also, they've even involved in their youth training. So I think that's the model China can actually learn from. Not just get a player, but also bring their skill sets, their experience, their mindset, and just let it spread throughout the system. And I think right now, China is being kind of conservative with this naturalization tactics. And Kyle Anderson is our only naturalized player. Instead of a real scorer, I would call him kind of a playmaker. Honestly, that doesn't solve our biggest issue. And also, the current rules are a little bit restrictive because only players with Chinese bloodlines are eligible for recruitment. So we might need to loosen up it a bit. Not saying we should, just start handing out passports right away. But if there's someone who fits exactly what we need, especially in like a scoring guard or a tough inside presence, I think we should go for it.
Right. If we take a look at the squads of the Asia Cup only, 9 of the 16 participating teams have naturalized foreign players.
Yeah.
For example, the Philippines, they are more like mercenary squads full of foreign players. And China is one of the only 7 teams that is comprised of only local players. Brandon, if we take a look at the trend now with more and more countries seeking naturalized options, do you think China should keep up with it, naturalize more players?
No, I actually think it's quite commendable what China's doing at the moment. I think that the regulations that are currently in place for naturalized players is pretty solid, and I agree with what you guys have said. I think it, allowing a pathway for young, hardworking talents to, that are from China and are Chinese to make their way into the national team and achieve their dreams. I think that's the right thing to do, and I think going forward it will also inspire a lot more local players to take up basketball and take it seriously and consider it as a professional career. If they're not concerned about being blocked by, an NBA star from the USA that's all of a sudden playing for Team China, I think that will be a very distressing sort of trend for local players who might reconsider playing basketball professionally or as youngsters might consider taking up another sport. But I mean, away from that, is there a talent drought in China? I wouldn't say so. I mean, yeah, we don't have massive superstars like Yao Ming, who's one of the greatest NBA players ever, coming into the team immediately, so I think that was kind of a golden age in Chinese
Yeah.
basketball talent, which is very difficult to maintain. It's kind of like a once in a generation sort of happening. I mean, I know the USA produces these sorts of talents week after week, but basketball is one of their premier sports. That being said, I think there is definitely some talent coming through, and I think that the CBA is a great talent pool to have emerging stars come through. And yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what the development of some stars like Yang Hansen and a couple of other players, we have to wait and see what they can eventually become. And, if they become, stars in the NBA and bring some of that, international exposure and star quality back to Team China, I think that will be really helpful. Yeah, look, I'm not completely against naturalization. I think if there's a massive tournament coming up, like, the FIBA World Cup or the Olympics or something like that, if there's a drastic lack of talent or a massive injury in a certain position, if you bring in 1 or 2 players, for a massive tournament, I'm not totally against that. But I think if that becomes a trend, I think that for long-term development of a team's success in a sport, I don't think that that is a great solution long-term.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hopefully, we can have more young Hansen emerging
Yeah.
from the Chinese leagues and other international competitions. And maybe one day we can have another Yao Ming emerging from the talent pool. Before we move on, here's a quick review of the biggest sports headlines in China and around the world for the past week. The 12th edition of the World Games opened in Chengdu, China. International World Games Association President Jose Perurena Lopez says the capital of Sichuan province is ready to stage a history-making event.
Because we need choice Chengdu city for the games. We have principal activities, the quality of the venue. Chengdu, the quality of the venue is top. Second, the public transport. The public transport is high quality.
The World Games is the highest-level international multi-sport event outside the Olympic Games. Running until August 17th, the Chengdu World Games feature 34 sports, 60 disciplines, and 256 events with approximately 5,000 athletes from around 110 countries and regions competing. Saudi Arabian champions Al Hilal have agreed a deal to sign Liverpool forward Darwin Núñez. Núñez helped Liverpool lift the Premier League title last season, although his inconsistency in front of goal meant he often started games on the bench. Landing the 26-year-old Uruguayan would be another coup for the Saudi Pro League, which has made a series of big-name signings over the last couple of years. Novak Djokovic has withdrawn from the ATP Cincinnati Open for the second consecutive year, which means the 38-year-old will be heading to the US Open having not played a competitive match since Wimbledon. The 24-time Grand Slam champion has opted out of the US Open warm-up tournament following consecutive semi-final exits at the French Open and Wimbledon. The US Open will take place from August 24th to September 7th in New York City. The World Aquatics Championships concluded in Singapore with 3 world records and 15 championship records in swimming, showcasing the continued dominance of the United States and Australia. The Chinese squad finished 6th in swimming with 2 golds, 6 silvers and 6 bronzes. Meantime, China wrapped up the diving competition in Singapore with 9 gold, 3 silver and 4 bronze medals. The squad, blending veterans with emerging talents, was named the best diving team of the championships. Olympic champion Pauline Ferrand-Prévot became the first French woman to win the Tour de France Femmes. The 33-year-old pushed through 3 punishing climbs to win the final stage, ahead of 2023 champion Demi Vollering.
I think I was just a bit scared, with the pressure of this jersey. So the teammate had to ride and they did a massive effort to bring me back at the front. I said to the DS, I would like to win in yellow. So if you can make it, why not?
Defending champion Katarzyna Niewiadoma-Fini finished 3rd overall. Lando Norris held off a late push from teammate Oscar Piastri to win the Hungarian Grand Prix in Budapest. For the McLaren drivers, it was their 7th 1-2 finish of the season. George Russell of Mercedes was 3rd. Welcome back. One of the biggest Chinese basketball rising star these days must be Yang Hansen, who was selected by the Portland Trail Blazers with their 16th overall pick in the NBA draft this year. Initially, Team China called him up for the Asia Cup, but later announced his absence because Yang Hansen has the Portland training camp to deal with at the same time. This decision earned much applause from Chinese fans because Yang Hansen just concluded a very exhausting workout period before his NBA draft, and international games means more injury risks and also a gap maybe with NBA games. In this case, I think Team China weighs more on Yang Hansen's individual long-term development instead of his instant influence or help for the team. So Tianyu, what do you make of Yang Hansen's absence at Asia Cup, and how should athletes balance, national duties and individual careers?
Yeah, I think honestly, having Yang Hansen sit out this Asian Cup tournament is actually a smart move. Because from the national team's perspective, sure, we'd love to have him. Because with Zhou Qi out, having a 7-footer big in the team is definitely a lot help. But we also got to be real here. I think it's not worth it bringing him in when he's still trying to, integrate into the new team, level up his game, and just settle into this new system in the NBA. I think young Hansen needs a lot of time to grow, to train with his elite teammates, sharpen his game. He's still super young. Throwing him into a high stakes tournament with not much preparation, I don't think is a wise move because it can actually hold him back in the long run. Yeah, I think the team choose to letting him focus on his development shows a lot of maturity and long-term thinking. This isn't just a China thing. When you look at Serbia, they've also been very super cautious with the use of Nikola Jokic. Because when he's deep in a NBA playoff run or he needs rest, they won't force him into international tournaments unless it's absolutely necessary. It's also the same with Luka Doncic and Slovenia. They manage his load carefully to maximize his impact when he actually suits up. It comes down to balance. Yeah, we want results at the Asian Cup, but we can't keep sacrificing long-term growth for short-term benefits. And giving them more flexibility to grow and to explore international opportunities doesn't weaken the national program. It actually strengthens it. So just imagine more confident and a more polished Young Hansen who could bring to the table in a couple of years.
Brandon, when national duties and club responsibilities collide, how should athletes balance it out? If we take a look at Yang Hansen's case here.
If we're looking at this case in particular, I think this is again another example of China's and Yang Hansen himself's eye on the long game. Yang Hansen has been identified as a potential pillar for, the Chinese national team in the long term going forward, and his development and protection is going to be seen as crucial for China's potential success going forward in major international competitions. So I think that when you identify someone as a hallmark player, the managing of their development and minutes on the court and rest and all of that sort of thing becomes crucial. A similar thing happens in South Africa, with our national rugby team. At the moment, our head coach, Raisi Erasmus, the South African national team setup has identified for international competitions, we'll normally call up about 40 to 45 players. But the national team has identified 20 key players that are seen as crucial talents within the national team, and those players' minutes for their clubs and for their national team, as well as their rest time and all of that sort of thing, is carefully managed by in coordination with the national team and the clubs. And I think something relatively similar is happening with Yang Hansen here. I think there's definitely been some coordination in terms of, making the decision to skip the Asia Cup this year. And like you guys mentioned, he had an incredibly grueling workout session, and his development within his squad at the Portland Trail Blazers, to become as influential in the NBA as possible and get as many minutes as possible and develop there, in terms of his skill set, his physicality, his speed, and just becoming the best version of himself. I think that's being prioritized right now, not necessarily just for Yang Hansen's success, but also so that when he does play for China, he is, the best possible version of himself, which will in the long term also give China a much greater opportunity to have success at major tournaments. So look, in general, I think it is tricky in all sports. I think it's always a conversation between the star player and, the club team and the national team, and figuring out where priorities lie, and also figuring out, conversations between a club and a national team, because also sometimes a lot of those conversations are financial. So often a lot of club teams will be saying, hey, we're paying this player, so much money, and you guys are not paying that much of it. So maybe we have more say over how many minutes he gets. Whereas the national team says, well, he is from our country and we get to determine when he plays for us or when he doesn't play for us. So sometimes there is conflict involved. But if there is open dialogue between, a star athlete and his club team and a national team, and the best interests of all three are kind of being prioritized, and there's ongoing transparent dialogue, I think that's the best possible situation. And that does seem to be happening with Yang Hansen at the moment. That might become more tricky in the future if he becomes more and more crucial for his NBA side and for the national team. Then there might be a bit more difficult conversations for Yang Hansen to have with the CBA and his NBA team. But at the moment, it does seem like his development and his protection is being prioritized. And I think in the long term, for his NBA team and for the CBA. I think that is the best possible solution.
Yeah, credits I think must be given to the Chinese Basketball Association because not playing Yang Hansen, one of the best players China has right now, while the team is experiencing an injury plague, is not an easy decision to make.
Yes.
Especially China didn't do well in the past 2 editions of the Asia Cup, exceeding in the quarterfinals at both occasions. So that's why every fan is thumbing up for this decision made by the Chinese Basketball Association. But now, besides China, there are lots of other established powerhouses at Asia Cup, like Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Iran. Their styles differ country by country, region by region. So if you think about it, the Asia Cup is a very diverse tournament in terms of the styles of different teams. For example, in my impression, Japan tends to play small with fast cuts and rotation, and teams like Australia and Iran, they more rely on their size to impact the game. So Tianyu, how distinct do you think is the style of Asian basketball? How is it different from European and American basketball games?
Yeah, I think Asian basketball definitely has its own flavor. Traditionally, it's been all about teamwork. I mean, ball movement, spacing, coordinated plays, and that's mostly because Asian teams, they don't usually have the same size or raw athleticism as teams from Europe or the US do. So the focus had to be on precision, discipline, and playing as a unit to stay competitive. But the game's evolving for sure. I mean, we're starting to see more individual brilliance coming out of Asia. I mean, guys like Yang Hansen and Hachimura, even though he's not a traditional, in a traditional sense, an Asian player, they are proving that Asian players can not only hold their own, but also stand out on the international stage. So I think these are players who can take over games, but not just play a role. And also, what's really exciting about it is that it's not just about skills around the rim anymore. We're seeing improvements in areas like shooting, especially from threes, and even perimeter defense. A lot of young Asian players are now training with overseas academies or even going through NCAA or pro development programs, and that's showing up in their playing style. They're becoming faster, more aggressive, and more versatile than before. So while the core identity of Asian basketball is still there, now it's blended with more individual talent and creativity. So it's like we're finding a new balance, not just playing smart, but also playing more bold.
Right. Let's see how Team China will perform at Asia Cup and which team will go all the way to lift the trophy in Saudi Arabia. With that, we end this episode of Sideline Story. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to Sideline Story and leave your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information, you can also check our website at radio.cgtn.com. Until next time, stay on the sidelines with us.